Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey Sister, how you doing?
Hey, sister, all is well here in one of the perhaps battleground states of the 2020 presidential election.
Yes, well, both of us are repping for the respective battleground states, and we want you to join this conversation tonight. So, if you are tuning in, we want you to like, follow, share this. Come on in the room. Get ready for a great conversation tonight because we have two phenomenal guests, and we are so excited to have them with us. So, we want you to like, follow, and share. If you are tuning in on YouTube, we want you to click that bell and that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode and you always know when we go live. And then we want you to join the conversation in the comments. That's where we have all the fun, is down in the comments section. So please join the conversation in the comments. Ask questions. Tell us if you like what we're putting down, and we're going to have so much fun tonight. Oh, both of us are talking about one thing tonight, sister. What's that? Vote. Vote. So I am in the battleground state, or maybe battleground state. We're not quite sure how it's all going to shake out, but Florida, and early voting starts in Florida on tomorrow, October 19th. So if you have not already gotten an absentee ballot, it is time for you to get in line early and get your voting on. Go online to find out where the early voting places are in your area. I know here in the Central Florida area, the county supervisor of elections office, as well as most of the public libraries, are places you can early vote. Even the Amway Center this year is a place where you can go and cast your ballot early. And if you've already received your ballot and you want to drop it off, you can drop it off there as well. So that's what I have to say. What about you, sister? When does early voting start out in Arizona?
Well, early voting actually started on October 7th and it runs through October 30th, but it varies by location. So definitely check, because I know some areas near me, you can't physically go and early vote until October 22nd. Obviously, many of us have already received our mail-in ballots. So if you have and you want to drop them off, you can drop them off at secure lock boxes around the state, or you can take a chance and mail them in. I probably wouldn't do that at this particular time. But so it's a lot of options. Most important thing is to vote. And if you have to stand in line, whether it's early or it's day of, stand in line, stay in line, and make sure that your voice is heard and your vote is counted.
Absolutely. I love that. Stand in line, stay in line, make sure your voice is heard. Well, we have two guests tonight who are definitely letting their voices be heard, and we're so excited to have them. We have with us the founders of the Black Girl, White Girl, having Black Girl and White Girl conversations, something like that. Talking about Black Girl and White Girl stuff. That's what I said. One Miss Tiffany Scott and Miss Tita Walker with us. So we want to thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so we're excited. We have some folks already on who are saying, hey, sister. So one of our super fans, hey, Cam, how are you? We have Jody. She says, hey, Tita and Tiffany. Hey, sisters. Miss Donna says, hey, sisters. We have Lakeisha. Hey, Keisha. We have Linda saying, hey, Soros. Hey, Sora, Linda. She'll be there to vote tomorrow. Please vote. And we have Miss Tasha Robinson Banks saying, good evening, ladies. Hey, Miss Tasha, how you doing? I got to give Tasha a shout out. Tasha is the Senior Service Director for the Boys and Girls Club, the Levy Hughes branch here in the Central Florida area. She just executed, with the help of her team and the community, because whenever Tasha calls, we all go running, the first drive-through college fair. And so we had 18 colleges,
Yeah.
2 branches of the military. There was healthcare station. There was a mental health conversations for the teen at the clubs. We did that because she did that. So woo, shout out Tasha. You know, so yes, there's so many great things that people are doing in the community that we just have to shout them out. But we want to start off tonight as we do in sister fashion with a little bit of hot topics. Now, me personally, I was like, I don't even want to talk about this no more because I won't give this no more air because Ice Cube is not the hotness at this moment. Now, do I love Ice Cube? Always have. I love Ice Cube from Boys in the Hood. I love him from NWA in my youthful days when, yes, always have loved O'Shea Jackson Jr. No, he's not Junior.
He's senior. But I was gonna let you keep going.
But I like Junior. He's a good little actor. But I like O'Shea Jackson. But O'Shea, I'll just say this: when you're out of your depth, let somebody throw you a life raft and don't continue to drown. That's all I have to say on the subject. But sister, I'm gonna let you lead this conversation because you know I ain't even want to talk about Ice Cube no more.
Okay, well, you didn't want to talk about it, but we're in Hot Topics. And in Hot Topics, you talked about the hottest topic, and that was one of the hottest topics of the week. Look, I think my biggest issue
well, tell the people what the problem is first.
Well, I mean, I thought you were gonna set it up, but so, all right. In a nutshell, earlier this summer, I saw Mr. Cube talking about his contract with Black America. He was making the talk show rounds on some, let's call it urban radio, if you will, and talking about this contract. Now, personally, it struck me because I thought Tavis Smiley had made a contract with Black America some years ago, so I was confused. But nonetheless, he had talked about working with.
I'm looking at my watch. How many years ago was that? Oh yeah, and Kamala Harris was one of the speakers at that conference. But I digress. Go ahead on, Ice Cube. Mm-hmm.
So he had this contract with Black America that he was promoting and saying how he had worked with economists and just leading Black experts in different fields about crafting what this specific contract would look like. And so apparently, coincidentally, I guess, days before, as we were leading up to this election, the Kushners contacted his manager, Jared Kushner, contacted Ice Cube's manager, somebody or another, and there were some meetings that were had, and allegedly Mr. Trump's platinum plan included what Mr. Cube had mentioned as a $500 billion infusion into the Black community as part of it. So Mr. Cube was saying he was willing to have conversations with Trump, but he didn't want to go directly himself because he didn't want to have a photo op. Now, there were those from the Biden campaign who did reach out to Cube as well to have conversations. However, their position, which I can't say I necessarily agree, was, how about we talk about this after the election? Which, you know, because it's kind of like if we
their position is we already have a plan, which a lot of what you have written is already included, but we have a little more depth on some other topics. So why don't we win first? Mm-hmm. Because we can't do nothing until we win. Mm-hmm. Let's win first, and then let's have this conversation.
And unfortunately, it just seemed like it took a turn because, you know, Mr. Cube is now getting a lot of backlash about, wait, you were so anti-Trump, and now you're basically saying because he's listening to your quote-unquote plan, and he supposedly took pieces of your quote-unquote plan for his platinum plan, that now all seems to be well, and Cube is trying to chalk it up to, I'll talk to anybody because I'm just here looking out for my people kind of thing. But I guess like what so the $500 billion infusion into the Black community. I'm always very curious because I'm like, I'm Black, but I guess I'm not in the Black community. Because
girl, where you at?
I'm just trying to know, am I in the Black community? Am I going to be a part of that $500 billion infusion? And is Ice Cube, I think you in the Black community.
Thank you.
That was my problem from day one. So several months ago, because Ice Cube was not the only one who had a plan, because T.I. has a plan too. T.I. is talking about his plan. Diddy over there talking about don't vote. And notice what they all have in common. They're all Black men. The misogyny runs deep and the patriarchy runs deep with a lot of our Black men right now. And this sister right here has a problem. I need all of y'all to take several seats. You are out of your depth on this issue, and you need to let the Black women who have been leading these efforts, who started Black Lives Matter, and folks like Tamika Mallory, why don't you lend those sisters your support? How about that? That's all I have to say. Oh, I'm sorry, sister. You're supposed to be talking about this. Let me shut up.
You have said what you felt. So there it is. I will just say that, Ice Cube also had, he was also promoting, the first time I heard him talk about this contract with Black America, his new social network, which was supposed to be competing with Facebook. But then when you click on it, it's like you end up going to Facebook or something. It was like crazy. I didn't get it. It was being promoted on Facebook, but we're going to move away from Facebook. Listen, I am not going to ever tell an athlete or a rap artist or anybody that, just shut up and dribble or stay in your lane. Never gonna say that. You absolutely have the right and the obligation to use your platform for positive uplift. But I think what you said is very correct. Number one, there have been a lot of different people who have had ideas about what makes sense for the Black community. But I think my challenge is we need to start by understanding, what are we saying when we say the Black community?
Yeah.
What are we saying when we say the platinum plan for Black Americans, or any plan for Black Americans? Because I think it needs to start by actually consulting with some Black Americans. And I'm not talking about just the ones that may be in your circle who live in areas that may or may not be representative of the whole. I just think that great idea, but possibly poor execution.
Well, that is all that we are. Well, no, that's not all we're going to say about that. I don't know. Our guest, I know, Tiffany, you said you hadn't heard this one because you've been disconnected from social media this week. I don't know. T-Ty, did you hear anything about this? Do you have any comments? I heard comments in the our.
I heard a little bit about it, but I agree with Christina. Like, what's this plan? Where did you get your data? We've heard this, we've seen this before, and I haven't seen any change from some of these influential rappers and who talked about a plan. The only person I really seen execute some stuff is LeBron James, like really built some schools, right, and built a community center. So I don't know what this plan. What is it? Like, where'd you get your data? Like Christina said.
And I'm with my sister. So let me make sure that I'm real clear. I am not saying that you cannot have a plan, that you should not have a plan, that you should not hold your elected officials accountable, right, that you should not try to advance policy conversations. But you've had a few months now to really get tight on this, to really understand the nuances, because again, when people say Black America, you're painting with a very broad brush, and regardless of socioeconomic status, we have certain issues that really do impact all of us, right? So there's so many nuances and things that alone, right, is a problem. And for you to allow yourself to really be hoodwinked and then to have your name slapped on something called a platinum plan, that was a problem. Well, I don't understand that. But let's see some of the comments we have. one says O'Shea can't smoke herbs while trying to write a very important contract for the brothers and sisters of the U.S. of America. He can smoke herb and write the plan he wants, but then get it validated by some people.
Well, he said that it was supposedly, like I said, he worked with economists, Black economists, and different people. When he talked about it on the Breakfast Club, I'm not saying it. It sounded like a good idea. It sounded like he had actually talked to some really sound individuals. But when you made the decision that I'm going to talk to the Trump administration because they're willing to talk to me, but I'm not going to talk, but the Biden administration, not even administration, the Biden campaign hasn't given me the type of response that I want to have, then I have a problem because then that feels very
self-serving. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we had one said, thank you, let's win first. Did the delegation elect him? Because Steve H., that's Steve Harvey, and now he's a no-go. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what have you? Where does Ice Cube live?
Well, let's see. Let me see if I can Google. I'm pretty sure it's probably Calabasas, but let's see.
The bastion of the Black community, Calabasas, California. Let's talk. Yeah, okay. Now, one thing on the Platinum Plan is from his plan. They just used his name. We have another comment here. Say it's all about the dollar bill, not surely who is going to control the money. Lend support and resources. Not today. It will amount to some workshops in the Black community with 150 sent to clubs, this Boys and Girls Club, for a pizza party. So, right, because we saw what happened when Jay-Z was playing chess with the NFL, and it ended up in what, some concerts and a soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just leave that right there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to correct you. According to something, now that was from 2016. I just did a real quick Google search. He lives in Marina Del Rey. So I just want to be very clear.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say, though,
the other bastion of Blackness, Marina Del Rey, California.
Yeah, I used to live there. Very white.
So there you have it. But the other thing is that, it's funny because when Andrew Yang, who I personally liked, was saying that he was going to give every family $1,000 or something to that effect, people were like, well, where is he going to get that money from? He can't afford to do that. And yet, somehow there was the stimulus package that was passed during COVID that roughly gave families like $1,200 or something of that effect. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how we find money for what we want to. But while we're talking about people being used for photo ops, that Platinum Plan and the Black America video, I'll just leave it at that. Just go check out the video and see all the folks y'all know.
Mm. Well, child. Okay, so we're gonna move right along because that was whew.
Way more time you want to spend. Okay.
No, because I'm already hot. See, I got on this sweatshirt because I want to tell the people about voting, but my pressure got up a little bit talking about that. Because this is the other thing we got to understand. There are binary choices in elections. Sometimes we don't have time for futile discussions when there's a binary choice at hand. And I'm sorry, I will take sanity over insanity. I will take seriousness over jest and jokestery any day. At this point, I will actually take speaking in complete sentences. How about that?
I would take knowing if you were positive or negative prior to a debate.
Let's talk about that. Okay. But we are super excited. We're going to transition on to our guests. We're so excited to have them. Somebody asked about the video. You could drop the link in the comments there, sister. But we are so excited to have live with Hey Sister tonight, Miss Tiffany Scott and Miss Tita Walker. They are the founders of the podcast, A Black Girl and a White Girl. Talking about Black girl and white girl stuff. And so welcome again to the show. We're so excited to have you here. I see you have your shirts on saying as strong as the woman next to me. I love that. So we're excited because we do believe that we're all as strong as the woman that's next to us. But if you all would first just kind of give us a little introduction about who you are individually, and then we'll talk about who you are collectively. So we'll start with you, Tita.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tita Walker, as Demetra said, and I am a brand strategist. I like to say I'm a brandology strategist, actually. That's what I do for, I guess you can say, income, okay? Because there's a lot of different things I like to get involved with personally. But essentially, I help, businesses connect and relate and be influential in the marketplace. I also love greatness, and I love extracting greatness from folks. So that's also part of my personal mission, just to allow people to know that no matter where they're at in their life or what they've gone through, that there's greatness within, and you can extract that to be who you were created to be. So that's part of me.
Yay. Well, thank you to Tita and Miss Tiffany.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I'm also a brand strategist, and it's how Tita, one of the many things that we bonded about when we first met. But my passion is obviously our podcast. But my other passion is sisterhood, and I have an organization called Sister Supper Club, or Sister Suppers, and it's where we get women to get together. Pre-COVID, it was in women's homes for a home-cooked meal, and we would have sharing circles so women could reignite the connection of sisterhood with one another. Now we do it online. And that's really about, and that's part of what our podcast is about too, is about really creating sisterhood and what that is, no matter what color, creed, background, socioeconomic part of the world you're from. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yes, and I'm so excited to have you both with us tonight. When we were preparing for this show, as I shared with you, one of my good friends, Adele George, she's watching tonight. She was like, "Oh, I met her at a conference in Vegas. I love Tiffany."
Hi, Adele.
So, hey, Adele, how are you? And so let's talk about your podcast. And so I know a little bit of the background into that. This was not something that you initially planned to launch this year. You actually initially planned to launch it some time ago. And but 2020 happened. And so boom, the launch happened. But tell us, why did you all start? So both of you brand strategists. So some people might say you're kind of competing businesses, but really, why did you decide to come together to even start these conversations?
Well,
you start.
Well, yeah. So like Tiffany said, we did meet at a conference, and yes, we're both brand strategists, but we go about it different process and framework. So we didn't see any competition. Actually, we saw where we could actually help each other. And at this conference, it was almost like one of those conferences that was, it was tight. Like we were in all day, all night. So, and Tiffany, it was here in Orlando. So Tiffany had flew in from Austin, and we were talking, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I just need to get away from campus." And I was like, "Hey, I got my car. Let's go have a meal outside of the resort." So we went and did that. And Tiffany and I were having a conversation over wings. And she was telling me about one of her partners who is Asian American, one of her partners that I don't know, she just felt comfortable to tell me the story. And she was like, she's upset with me. And I was like, "Why is she upset with you?" And she's like, "Because we were having this conversation. I told her that, well, I don't see color. I don't see your color." And I remember I looked at her and I go, "Well, that's why she's upset with you." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" So then I broke it down to Tiffany, and then Tiffany was like, "Well, then what about this? And then what about that? And then what about this?" So then she just kept asking all these questions. So we ended up having a full-on conversation about race, culture, diversity. And then essentially when she went back to her hotel, I guess it stressed her out, it kept her up. And then she called me, or I think she called me when she got back to Austin. She's like, we need to have a show about this. I need to share. Other white women need to know this. Like, they don't know this. We gotta tell them this information. Like, we need to have conversations around race, and we need to have conversations around culture and so forth. So that's how that's where it initially stemmed from.
So was that an accurate representation of your affect that day, Tiffany? Did you call her and say, we have to talk about this?
Yeah, it was pretty much, because and I always talk about this, like when Tita was so generous and gracious with honestly breaking it down to this naive and ignorant white woman, I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, like I have offended my friend. This was really naive of me and I should know better and all the things. And I was like, well, you know what? Like, it's not every day that a white woman and a black woman that don't really know each other get to have these conversations. Like, I just think it was definitely divine intervention. Like, it was meant to happen. And I was like, well, what would it be like if we could bring women behind the scenes of what a real and raw conversation looks like, that then almost gives them permission to ask the friggin' stupid questions, you know, like I did, and feel okay with making the mistakes and give themselves permission to really investigate further. And Tita and I talk about this all the time. Like, it starts with conversation. It starts with listening. Like, if we can get to a point where we can really open up the dialogue and the conversation, I think that's just, it's groundbreaking of what could happen. And I know for me, my own personal experience has been exactly that. Like, from there, the banter that Tita and I had was, it was comical, actually, because I'd say something, she'd be like, oh girl, oh my God. I'd be like, oh boy, okay, this is and then I'd be like, but this is what we need to have on the podcast. These are the things that white women are asking or too afraid to ask, and things like that. So it really just started from both of us wanting to bring more awareness to the differences and to the unknowns, and allow people to step into the uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And I love those conversations. And so then I have to ask this question. So since I know Tita personally as well, because in our circles, Tita's so white.
I know, right?
We do just have this conversation.
I'm not trying to tell all her business, y'all. But she grew up she has Louisiana roots on her mom's side, but really her mother left there, and she grew up in Seattle, Washington. And we had to like inform her who Frankie Beverly and Mays was. Now, if you black and you watching, I know you feel some way about that. Look, she feel I outed her a little bit, but that's okay. If I offended you, I'm sorry. But again, your experience. So that's when we go back to that conversation with about Ice Cube, about speaking for Black America. All of our blackness is a little different, right? Mm-hmm. And so, so you guys started this bond and having these conversations, Tita, that was a brave thing to do, because you didn't owe that to Tiffany.
Right. But I think, to your point, yes, because raised in Seattle, and Tiffany and I have this conversation too, because I say there's times when I feel like I'm too Black, and that's when I'm, with a bunch of white people. Yeah. And then there's times I'm with Black people who have a lot of Black culture and who have those deep roots where I don't feel Black enough at all. So I do have, and I finally gotten to a place to where I'm like, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I'm gonna be. So either accept and love me, or before it used to stress me out, right? I used to get all stressed and worried. But I think, though, honestly, the reason why Tiffany and I probably was able to have the conversation was because I grew up around so many whites, and I had to defend, or I don't even want to say defend, but I had to be aware of being Black. I had to be aware of how I interacted or how I communicated. So I was used to knowing how to even navigate even white people. And I mean, to a point too, where I kind of know how to manipulate, because I've gotten to know a lot of their ways and so forth too, right? So whereas maybe a Black person who was raised all Black and then had the conversation with Tiffany might be like, I don't know. But I was able to be like, oh, she's just ignorant and naive, and I've dealt with this all my life. So let me just tell her what the truth is here, since we're just having an open and honest conversation. So I felt no kind of way. I just told her, like, I was like, that's what you did wrong. And then she was just, when she was asking me more questions, and I was like, yeah, you might not want to do that either. Yeah, no, that's a stereotype. Yeah, you might want to do some investigation and research on really what the Black race is about. So, but then from her perspective, being from from Australia, that's where I think she got the confusion from, was because in Australia, she can tell you, she speak for herself, but they look at us as just Americans. So they didn't see, she was saying like, they didn't see us as this division with racism until she came and lived here. So I think that's what, when we were having conversations, I think that's why she was just so flabbergasted and so like, almost like she was going to cry. She got very, very sad because she was just like, I really had no idea. And then, so you mean I came into this white privileged country and I played into it as well? I was like, well, but you didn't know. I mean,
yeah.
And I also just want to say, like, there's racism in Australia against our Indigenous Aboriginal people as well. So there's so many layers, as we know, like we discuss about the layers and the systemic and all the things. And so, in my opinion,
I blame it all on the British. It's wherever those Britons.
Seriously, it's crazy. Like, I've traveled to a lot of places in the world, and it's like, really, another white person did this, and it comes from either the Dutch or the British, or anyway, we won't go into the history of it, but it made me really reflect. Like, I could have stood behind my, but I'm Australian and I don't know better, but it let me really look at, okay, this is happening here, right? I choose to live here, so I choose to understand where I'm living and all those sorts of things. And oh my God, what have I been playing into in my own country, in my own culture? Like, shit. Yeah. So sorry, Tita. She hates it when I swear.
Hey, it's not fine.
If shit is the word, shit is the word.
Yeah.
It's another word. I don't know.
It's fine.
Well, sister, come on in here and you ask a question.
Well, I'm not going to ask the question that you think I'm going to ask, because there were so many things that were just said that now I had to write down 2 new questions. How about that? So I want to ask Tiffany, why didn't you feel like you saw color? And the reason I'm asking that question is because when it comes to, and I really just had this, we had a whole thing, work, they trying so hard. Anyway, it's a whole nother thing. But we had a conversation the other day and my boss was asking us, we watched this video. I think the lady's name is Penny McIntosh. You can look it up on YouTube. She talks about privilege systems, and she's talking about her privilege as a white. She first was talking about how white men, exercise their privilege against white women, and then she recognized for herself that she was doing it to Black women, and it's really great. And she's this older white woman, just very demure, soft-spoken, but it's a very powerful piece. But anyway, we were having a follow-up discussion. Part of my conversation was like, I just don't understand why we can't have these conversations. Like, until you can actually just say, like, Christina's a Black woman. I said, I get it. Sometimes the term African-American messes up some folks. That term doesn't resonate with me. I'm Black. That's what resonates with me. So if you don't know that, like, I don't expect you to figure that out. But just like with the LGBTQIA community, I don't know all the acronyms. I don't know all the deals. Please tell me, because I don't want to offend. I don't want to do the wrong thing. So anyway, I was asking, why didn't you feel like you saw color? Because I'm sure if I ask you what color Tita's shirt was, you would say it was Black, or mine heather gray, or well, maybe Kitty's heather gray. I don't know. I don't even know what heather gray is really. But why did you feel like you saw color when it came to people? But I'm sure you recognize color, unless you're colorblind, and then that's another conversation.
I'm not colorblind.
Okay.
It's a really good question, and it kind of took me a while to deepen into why that may be. And I think everyone sees color, everyone sees differences, everyone has judgments around that. And it would be, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I saw those different things and I saw those different nuances. I think for me, initially, and Titar, again, we've talked about this because we talk about everything. Initially for me, I had this realization, it was months after we had the original I Don't See Color conversation. And for me, it was like, well, you know, I was brought up with a lot of American pop culture, right? So the Cosby Show, I know that's controversial now, you know.
Go ahead.
But, you know, a lot of American pop culture, Michael Jackson, whatever, like Janet Jackson, like that's who's just coming to mind right now. But growing up, it was like a lot of Black, you know, to me, Black Americans were synonymous with America. That's just what it was for me. Yeah. And so there was that part that played into it. But, you know, the friend that Titar that was talking about, who I really offended, she was Korean American. And I was like, so what does that mean? And for me, it was like, kind of like, if you have an American accent, you're American to me. That's where it was like this kind of broad sweeping, you have an American accent, you're American to me. However, I had to then go back into my own culture and my own history. I was like, okay, how does that play out for me in my homeland, right? And I will tell you now, Australians are very racist. It's a broad sweeping brush, but they are racist. And I was brought up with very racist parents, particularly against Asians. Like I grew up in a town where there was a lot of Japanese, a lot of Chinese, a lot of Thai, a lot of East Asian. We're very close to, in proximity to East Asia. So a lot of Asian immigrants. And there was a lot of racism about that. And I had prejudices and bias against that as well. Aboriginals, you know, I grew up with that they're dirty and, you know, they drink a lot and all those sorts of things. And I had, my father at the time was living in a part of Australia where he sold cars to Aboriginal people. And this is when I was 9, 10 years old, because they got a certain amount of money and he would make money off that because they'd get drunk and they take that money and they trash the car and they come back and they'd buy another one. Horrible stuff, right? Really bad. And so I had to go back and, okay, well, you see color there. But then I looked at my workplace where I'd work with, you know, lots of different, not as diverse as here. Australia is very white. I notice when I go back now that there's a lot more diversity being shown on television and ads and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's very white. And I was like, okay, well, you worked with a Chinese girl. She was my assistant. And I had, you know, there was a lot of, again, I'm going to refer to Asian Americans. And they spoke Australian, so to speak. And again, the same thing. If you spoke Australian, I was less likely to see the color. I remember when I was in university, there was an gorgeous Indian Australian girl. And she said to me once, see that, like we're walking past like a really well-known Australian fashion brand. See that? They never show me inside their windows. And I was like, huh. And then didn't think anything more of it, right? And so when I say that is my reasoning around why I didn't see color, the truth is underlying, if you really want to dig deeper into it, I still see color. I just like, if you have a certain accent, well, therefore you're not that person. But if you had a certain, you know, accent, like a Chinese accent or, you know, whatever that was different, then you were different to me. And I saw that. So.
And you live in Texas. So there are so many weird accents there. I mean, I'm from Louisiana and I can say that we have a lot of different accents. So
it's still American to me, right? Like there's still American accent.
No doubt. But I'm just saying that's just so interesting because to me,
yeah, you're right.
You know, one of my former colleagues and I were just talking, and he was signing up for some webinar. It was like being Black and British. And he was like, I just want to hear them talk. And I was like, yeah, don't they just sound intelligent no matter what they're talking about, even if they don't know what they're talking about? So, I mean, it's just funny because I just feel like you don't even have the benefit of having a cool accent here in America. But
Well, you had a second question, sister. Go ahead with your second question.
So my second question was just kind of playing off of that conversation. Why do, and I don't mean to sound flippant or ignorant in this with this question, but why are white people, dare I say white women specifically, so afraid? Because you said you're having like these sister conversations, meetup dinners, and which I think is a great idea. I think it's awesome to be able to talk to people of various backgrounds and get to know them as actual people. But I'm always, and I ask the same thing, like I said, at work and in business. I'm like, what are we so afraid of? If we know that there is a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, then shouldn't we all be striving for that? What are we so afraid of? So I'm just curious, like at the time, what were you afraid of in broaching the conversations with? I mean, you were brave enough to obviously broach them with Tita, so.
You know what? I think I was naive, honestly, to raise that with Tita. I didn't know any better. And I was just lucky that I was gracious enough that I was sitting in front of Tita, who was so like, okay, girl, I'm going to break it down with you. And I just remember being mortified. I think, well, I'm also a very curious person too. But it's interesting. Like I asked Tita the question. I didn't ask my friend that question. And I think why white women don't engage in the conversation, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience, is because we don't want to insult or upset. We don't want to say the right thing. We don't want to be deemed bad or racist or ignorant or stupid or all the things. And so then therefore the conversations kind of happen behind closed doors. Now, I know I've had similar conversations with white friends, and I'd had a conversation with my white friends before I met Tita, and I think that was one of the tipping points where I was like, well shoot, that's not going to help. If I'm having conversations with my white friends, I'm not getting a different perspective or objective or what's really going on for that woman of color, right? So therefore I was like, we need to bring this to the forefront. And so for me, again, I remember sitting in my hotel room that night texting Tita going, we've got to do a podcast on this. Like, I've never wanted to do a podcast before. They seem like a lot of work, but we've got to do a podcast for this. And then I remember after, she was like, yeah, okay. Like I don't remember Tita, but for me, it felt like it was immediate yes for you. And I remember sitting in the bathroom in my hotel room going, oh, F-U-C-K. What am I about to get myself into? Because I'm putting myself on the line here as the white, naive, silly white woman that's going to ask the stupid questions. And then I sat there and I was like, it's worth it. You know, it's so worth it, because then it gives permission for other white women to do the same. And then I've learned so much along the way, like don't ask your Black friends to educate you, and, you know, all those sorts of things. Go and do your own research, and, you know, don't presume that they're just going to let, you know, that you can just do that. Like, I'm also very fortunate. It does work to my advantage that I'm Australian. I'm not going to lie. It does, because I do have a lot of Black girlfriends, of Black sisters that go, okay, girl, all right, like, we're going to let that one slide, but next time do this. It you know, it just does. So, you know, that's great. Like, whatever it works to get this conversation out there, then so be it. But back to your point, Chris, like, I think it's just like, we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to offend you. Well, anymore than you already have, right? Like,
I will say, and to Tasha's comment here, that there are days that look, we're tired and we don't feel like having these conversations. We don't feel like bringing you up to speed. Do a little research, get on Google, find yourself a book. Yes, there are those days, but I will say, more often than not, I believe that we would prefer to have this conversation and you come from a place of, you know what, I just don't know this, than to say like, you know, with all the quote unquote Karens we've seen out there on the interwebs who are just calling the police on folks who are going to their house because you don't think that they're supposed to live there. It's like there's got to be a middle ground. Like you don't have to know everything. And I think most of us are open to teaching and having the conversation. And truth be told, there are going to be some times where you will have to stand in the gap for us and have those conversations with your white friends, because I can't have them.
Oh yeah.
Your white girlfriends, I'm just not going to be able to talk to them about certain things. So we will need allies and those to stand in the gap. But I think more often than not, we would rather engage with folks who are coming from a genuine place. Like, I just don't know. Because I was about to start when you were mentioning about racism in America. I was just about to say, you know, pardon my ignorance, I've never been to Australia, but I've heard that. And so I was going to say the same thing about the Aboriginal comment. So, I mean, I would be completely ignorant on anything about Australia. So I think it goes all ways.
But here's the thing, ignorance can be cured.
Yes.
So the ignorance can be cured. Conscientious stupidity cannot be. Right? Because that's two different things. Once you know, you know. So you're no longer ignorant. Now, if you willfully ignore it, then you have willful ignorance, and that's a whole different conversation, right? Because there are people who are willfully ignorant. So they do know, they have some knowledge, but they choose to put blinders on for whatever reason. That's a whole nother conversation.
And we brought that up too. Yeah. I've had to tell Tiffany, no, Tiffany, that's being ignoring.
Yes.
Willfully ignorant.
So we have a few comments here, and I put some up as we were going. I applaud Tiffany for wanting to be educated and having the conversations with Tita. As for me, I'm exhausted and just don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah.
Well said. You don't have to know everything. Just know in 2020 we can no longer be clueless.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are really good comments.
If you ask me about Seattle, I'm gonna ask Tita because I don't know.
Bam.
I know nothing. And so
very white.
We are willing to have the convo as Black women.
Sometimes.
But yeah, so that whole Seattle, that Washington, Oregon thing, that's a whole other history lesson.
It's another whole situation. It really is. Yeah. A whole nother culture, a whole nother country.
Yeah, go and watch our podcast we did a few episodes on that, didn't we? I learned so much through that as well. And I have to say, like, I get small insights of what it's so-called like to be a Black woman. And what I mean by that is when Tita and I decided to do, like, reignite the podcast, it was was when George Floyd got murdered, and we were like, girl, we've got to pick this back up. And so I was deep in it, like just so consumed and so devastated and all the things. And I had white sisters reaching out to me and saying, can I have a conversation with you? And I was like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I was like, oh my God, this is what it's like for a Black woman, a Black man, every day of their life. And I was like, oh, and I just got like a, short window into it. Like, but even that experience was so visceral for me. I was like, oh, I get it. Because I was exhausted. I'm like, oh, and I think I messaged Tita and I was like, I have these dear friends, dear sisters of me with good intentions reaching out and saying, hey, can I talk to you about this? Can I talk to you about that? And I was just running back and going, no, I can't do it. I don't have the capacity. I'm exhausted. I'm drained. And so that was really powerful for me on so many levels. And I don't think, again, I'm very lucky, I think, that I had that experience. Not many white people will ever have that experience. You just can't. And I have the advantage, again, I think it's an advantage for me and my growth, is that I have a Black boyfriend. And so I live in very different shoes now. Like just the other day, I mean, we're in Texas. Just the other day, we went to a place to hire some paddleboards. We love being on the water, and there was these white people that were running the marina, and they had very thick. And again, this is me being biased and being stereotypical. They had very thick Southern Texan accents, and they were white. And immediately I was on alert. Okay, how are they going to be? What are they going to say? I'm ready to defend. Like, how are they going to show up? And he was just like, he's very comfortable in his own skin, which is another reason why I love him so much. And I was like, oh, God, this is what you've got to be like all the time. This is crazy, you know? And so I think that like everything happens for a reason, and the fact that I get to have these insights is so viscerally powerful for me, because then I can say to my white friends, oh, girl, you don't even know. Like, imagine what it's like to live like this on standby every day. And I can viscerally speak to it because I've had a little, like probably a thousandth of the degree of what it's like, but I can then relay that to them, right? Where they can go, you know, white girl to white girl. Oh, yeah, I've never really thought about that before. I'm like, well, think about that.
Right.
That's powerful. And that was one of the questions that was shown here about how are your white friends receiving it now that you have this enlightenment? And so that you saying that they're, and I'm sure you probably have varying degrees of how they're receiving it.
Yeah, very varying degrees. Like, we had a really good friend of mine on the podcast the other day that I'm just so proud of, because she is going deep on the journey, really deep on the journey. And she's a white, I'm just going to say she's white, right? And she'd be happy for me to say that. And then, you know, I've got another friend that has a black boyfriend, and she's oblivious, like just doesn't get it at all. And I'm like, how is that possible? You know, so it's every spectrum of what you could imagine. But my closest sisters, my closest girlfriends are in it for the dialogue and the conversation. And sometimes they're not. You know, because I'm living and breathing it right now, and they know that. But you know, the ones that are willing are the ones that I'm willing to have the conversation with. You know, and again, T-Tara and I talk about this all the time. Like, some people you're just never going to change, and you know, and there's some friends that I will just, like, you know, I continue to let go of. Like on Sister Suppers, we've lost over 2,000 followers because my every second post was Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. You can go to Sister Supper Club and you'll see it. And I lost thousands of followers, and I'm like, great.
Yeah, it was like 22,000, and now you have like 19, I think. Yeah, they dropped. Yeah.
But you know what? One of the things I would say about that, and then I have to ask more questions about the podcast, and our time is running out. But this conversation is so rich that I'm just loving it. But I posted something today, an interview with a pastor that's here in our Central Florida, who was a spiritual advisor during the Obama administration. Then he voted for Trump, and now he's like supporting Biden and Harris. But one of the things he said in that interview, and it was on Christiane Amanpour's show, and Michelle Martin was interviewing him. And Michelle Martin is a longtime Black journalist, excellent journalist, and she was with NPR for years. But he talked about that loss of money, of doing these conversations in the church. And, you know, pastors say, well, they can't lose that money. And they, you know, he was like, I did a whole series on this and I lost this many members. And as I prefaced it when I made the post, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? So, you know, to you, Tiffany, you know, those aren't your true followers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
That is, you know, what are we gaining by appeasing people who tacitly endorse and support any degradation, denigration, demeaning of other human beings, whether it's because of the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, heck, that they're from South Louisiana or from Seattle, right? You know, we have all kind of reasons that we put people down, right?
Yeah.
So no, in the year of our Lord 2020, no, we just not doing that no more. You can't get away with it. Not when you know better. That's where I stand.
I agree with you on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I moved forward with the podcast this year. Like we said, we tried to do it 2 years ago, just life happens. But, you know, Tiffany, her tipping point was George Floyd. My tipping point was the triggers, right? Just a lot of this, all this racism coming up, even more so just boom, boom, boom. And it triggered everything that I experienced in Seattle, and which made me kind of like operate in this like persona that I really, am I black or am I white? You know, like just being uncomfortable all the time. Like, so I was just like, enough is enough. Like, I'm who I am, and we need to talk about this, because even as a black person, I shouldn't have to be worried about being around black people thinking that I'm not black enough. And around the white people, I shouldn't have to be all wary and alert because I'm black. So that was more of my reason why I wanted to have the conversations, because I was like, enough. Like, it's stressful as it is, and then to have these traumas come up and then have it affect you in all sorts of different ways. And so for me, it's been actually therapeutic, because I've been able to help folks. I've been able to educate, but I also been able to actually go down a healing and journey for me as well as who I am, being comfortable in my skin the way that I am meant to be. So that's why I wanted to actually move forward with the podcast.
Awesome. Well, then, so back to the podcast, because we've certainly strayed away. And this is a little bit of a three-parter. So, what did you learn so far that surprised you? You know, something you learned that surprised you, something you learned that really deeply saddened you, and then something that you learned that motivated you.
Surprised, saddened, motivated.
Yep.
I think for me, the surprise is how open and honest I have been. And I've, you know, I mean, I have family members who played into things, you know, just because of trying to run away from Louisiana, but thought that going to Seattle would be the best thing. You know, just, I think for me, surprise is how honest I've been. And this is everything we say is public domain, and anybody can hear it and read it. And I've talked about my family, Tiffany, haven't I? I talked about experience of my stepdad and all the dynamics I experienced as a black person in Seattle, whether it was the black family who was trying to be not black, or whether it was around the white people who weren't accepting me because I was black. So everybody's hearing everything. So I think that surprised me as open as I've been.
So you think everybody can get their issue today, because Tita is living her best life. So if you ain't ready, you need to get ready, because you can get it too. How about that?
Yes. So I think that's what surprised me the most.
Okay. Anything that saddened you or motivated you?
I think what saddens me is like what we, you know, being here in 2020 and we just got these ignorant or want to ignore, not accept the truth. That's what saddens me. It really makes me sad that folks just do not want to accept the truth.
Okay. What about you, Tiffany?
I think what surprised me was, like I said, like, you know, 2018, we were going to do this, and then we put it on hold because just a lot of stuff happened for Tita and for me actually as well. Like, it was a lot. And then coming back to it, there was like this even more determination of how this was not even like I need to do it or I want to do it. It's like I have to do it. It's almost like I don't have a choice. Like, it is driving me more than anything. It's like I've got to do it. And I mean, if someone said to me, you know, 2 years ago, actually, oh, you're going to start a podcast about dismantling racism and opening conversation, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
what do I know about that? You know, there's just no way. And so that's a big surprise to me. I think what makes me sad, what makes me really sad, and I'm laughing at myself because this is going to sound really privileged right now. Why is not everyone listening to it? You know what I mean? Like, everyone needs to know this stuff. And this is not coming from a place of like, we're amazing and we make such sense and we're so logical and we're so professional and polished, because we are not.
No, that's not true. What she's trying to say, because we have this conversation, we see the views. They're being viewed. She's mad that white women aren't interacting in the comments. And I told her they're not comfortable enough to do that, but they are watching, because sometimes we get DMs, privately DMs and so forth, but she wants them to be like her.
Engaged.
She wants them to be like all in the conversation. And I said, some just won't feel comfortable having the conversation, but they're actually watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a great first step if they are actually watching, because as you can see, we have a few very loyal white sisters that rock with us, but not many. So it'll happen. It'll happen.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. Well, so
no, I didn't hear motivated from each of you.
For me, I think what's motivating is just like Demetri said, I'm living life for my best life, and I hear the down low to keep going, do you, be you. And so I think that's just motivating me to just keep going and moving forward, and just having these conversations. I'm all about conversation and communicating. And I think that just helps people change perspective. So what motivates me is I know each conversation does help someone change their perspective, or does help someone reflect more. And so knowing that is what keeps me motivated.
Nice.
Yeah, what motivates me is like when we get we get a DM or we get a message, and T-Tail's really good at following up and sending them to me. Like when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, like I had no idea," or I'm so much more, aware now, or you have no idea how much that meant to me, or just little by little, like I feel like we're just chipping away. And there was a time where I was being exceptionally vocal and, losing followers, which I honestly didn't care about. I was grateful for that, where sometimes, I'm sure you get this, you feel like the world's against you when you're fighting the fight, right? And then every now and then I would get a message from someone saying, thank you, like, just thank you, or I get it now, or I can do better. I was like, okay, that's enough over any of the haters or any of the people that don't get it and don't understand it. And that's where T-Tail keeps me in the marathon. But just that one person that makes that one comment, that's all it takes is for you to keep going. And that's what motivates me.
Awesome. Well, then, ladies, as we get ready to kind of come to a close,
I have to ask my final question. Are you going to go to the end?
Okay.
Wait, what?
So we're gonna go a few minutes longer, folks. I have a question and I have a summary, and I want to shout out. I shouted y'all out in the comments, Denise Toops. So, white woman, been down with us from day one.
Yes, amen.
Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you, Denise. And Adele George for being a real supporter and friend. And thank you. So everybody else, y'all know y'all been down like 4 flat tires from the beginning. Everybody who's still watching. So, but I want to shout them out because we talk about Black stuff all the time, and they still tune in and listen. That's why I love them. So,
love it.
All right, your question.
Well, the question that I had, because our friend Tiffany is from Australia, and she was recently home. I just wanted to understand, what do we look like in other parts of the world? Like, what are they really saying about America?
Be honest, Tiffany.
Oh, I'll be honest. Yeah, it's not good. It is not good at all. Like, all I can say from Australia, just being there recently, is that It's bad. Trump looks like an absolute idiot. Like there's nothing well spoken about him at all. And there's actually, I don't watch a lot of television, but when I was there, I did. And there were some really informative things that I wasn't even aware of, that Australians are very invested in America. We're allies. We go to war together. You know, we're very invested in America. And so there was a lot of things that I learned from Australia, because it's a different perspective, right? That it was even like not even, it was just very neutral, that was very factual for me. And I can't re-quote it because I'm not a really quote factual person. That was really insightful around how much damage he's actually doing for the world right now. And I'm just going to say it, like, he's a laughingstock. He's a laughingstock in Australia for sure. Like there's no good things, and people are just waiting for America. And this deeply saddens me, because this is where I choose to live and I love it for so many reasons. They're just waiting for America to crash and burn. And I think there's this perspective of, it's finally America's waking up that you're not the great nation, right? Like, we're not the great nation and we've been arrogant for too long. And it's the wake up call that Americans have needed. And so, and then, you know, what was beautiful for me was there were Black Lives Matter protests happening in Australia. And it gets me emotional, because like, as hard as it was to see the tipping point with what happened with George Floyd, it is affecting the world. And if the world is waking up, amen to that. Like, to see that in the country that I was born in, you know, to see Aboriginal people fighting for their lives and bringing to the forefront in something that happened differently but kind of the same in America, that's taking effect in a country like Australia. Wow. You know, we're in the conversation now. And like you were saying before, if you know, you know now. You know. And for our podcast, we just want you to know. We want you to know. We want you to know.
Yeah. And it was important for me to ask that question, because sometimes I mean, prior to COVID, obviously, you know, I've had a chance in these last 3.5 years that Trump has been in office to travel abroad, to see how news reports reflect who we are in other countries and what they're saying. And of course, we've seen the pictures of, you know, prime ministers and other world leaders laughing at this guy. And it hits me in a place that I'm just like you said, you don't know, like, wake up. How is it that you don't see what we're projecting to the world? And it is not a good look. We do not look like the world leader. And to your point, it's, you know, again, I always think back to when then Senator Obama was running for president, and he had to denounce Reverend Jeremiah Wright because about the chicken and the roost. And at the end of the day, I'm like, but here we are in 2020. And in a lot of ways, we are seeing that. We are seeing the very things that the arrogance be challenged. We're seeing the rest of the world questioning our
ignorance as well as arrogance be challenged.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I just had to. I had to hear you say that, because if somebody else watches this who is a white woman or white man, and maybe they hear it again from someone else who has a different worldview and is privy to seeing things in a way that we aren't sitting in this country, then that's a positive. And you know what? Some people may not like it, and we might lose a supporter. Probably not.
but I will say that's why watching, like, I love catching BBC News from time to time, or anytime you can catch a news broadcast from outside of the country, like legitimate news. I'm not talking about following down some of these rabbit trails on social media, but legitimate news sources.
Right.
Reuters, you know, AP, some legitimate news sources from when they're doing their reports from around the world. It is quite insightful. It is quite insightful. So where do you go from here? And this is going to be the last question for tonight. You know, where do you go from here with the podcast, and how long do you want to keep having these conversations? You know, I never would have thought that in 2020 we would be needing to have, I knew we would be having certain conversations. I thought they would be far different, you know, but it's like, okay, are we part of the Matrix? Are we back in 1968,
Right.
1958, or 1940? Like, where have we landed? And so, you know, what do you hope to gain from the podcast? And then, how long do you want to continue the conversation?
Well, Tiffany, you can chime in. I think we're just gonna go as long as we need to go, right?
Yeah.
And we are actually going to have a full-on strategy session within the next 60 days of what we want to accomplish with the podcast in 2021. Right? Yeah, it's 2020. Yeah, 2021. And and we actually have some different types of products that we want to develop for families to help start with young children to talk about race and so forth. So there's a lot of great ideas and downloads that are coming of how we want to expand the podcast into really infiltrating homes and communities to really have these deep conversations and to really understand racism, because it starts from acceptance, to be able to accept it so that you can make the change. If you don't accept something, then how are you going to move forward to make change? So
as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And that's probably till, unfortunately, till the day we die, really.
Yeah.
If we're realistic about it. Because the conversations, I hope, evolve a lot from where they are now.
Yeah.
So as long as it takes.
Yeah.
So how can people find you? I want to type in the comments here so they can find your podcast, so they can subscribe. I know that you're here, you go live here on Facebook as well, but I know you're on all the streaming platforms. So how do they find you? What's the @ How do they @ you?
So for Instagram, they can @ us a Black girl, a white girl.
Okay, hold on, because I got to type these out. A Black girl, a white girl. That's IG.
Yeah.
And then our website is blackgirlwhiteGirlConversations.com. Is it conversation or conversations?
Conversations.
Okay.
Conversations.
Black
And then,
girl,
yeah.
white girl. And then when they go to our website, then that's how they can get to our YouTube channel, and they can get to our iTunes or Spotify and all the other platforms to listen or watch.
Okay. Well, hey, sister family, you know we are all about supporting one another and lifting one another up. So go to IG, follow a Black girl, a white girl, and go to blackgirlwhiteGirlConversations.com. Subscribe to their website so you find where their YouTube channel, catch them wherever you listen to your podcast, and let's continue to have these conversations. I want to thank you both for coming on tonight live with Hey Sister to share all this goodness. T-Ty, you talked about greatness. I think this was absolutely great. I know we went a little over than the hour, but I think it was well worth it because we got some depth on some of these topics and your experiences. And so keep being brave and keep showing up. And thank you for being a part of the Hey Sister family.
Thank you.
It's
an honor.
Yes, that's awesome.
Thanks so much. Sister, anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you all for being here, and thank you for being two new sisters. I mean, T-Ty, you've already been in the family, but Tiffany, welcome to the Hey Sister.
All right, we're going to end our broadcast tonight. Ask you ladies to hold the line for a second. We're getting some thank yous and good night. So good night, everybody.
Good night.